Ukraine and Russia are fighting a war of strategy and resources as well as war. In this scenario, every move by each party has major consequences for the situation. Recent reports of Ukraine's tactical adjustments and Russia's resource depletion raise numerous uncertainties about the war's future. Russia's constantly changing timelines for military goals have raised questions about its plan's efficacy, conflict context, and strategy. The adversary, with Western backing and Ukrainian support, appears to be improving its future negotiating position. In response, Russia has seen increased support for its army and a rise in volunteers willing to defend the nation. This reaction follows Ukraine's Kursk counteroffensive, which has stirred diverse opinions. While Putin blames the West, many Russians hold him responsible, with protests erupting among Kursk evacuees. Meanwhile, some Ukrainians question President Zelensky's strategy, arguing resources could have been better focused on defending against Russian advances. The counteroffensive, however, marks a significant shift, challenging assumptions of Russian dominance and highlighting Ukraine's ability to stage operations near the Russian border undetected. This has altered the narrative in Kursk, presenting Ukraine with new opportunities for negotiations and territorial leverage while creating internal pressures for the Kremlin. Reports suggest growing doubts among Russian elites about the leadership's ability to manage the situation. Russia is now attempting to reclaim the area with the aid of North Korean forces, reportedly deploying 5,000 troops. However, displaced residents, angered by their forced evacuation, have voiced strong protests, refusing to leave and demanding answers from the authorities. This escalating tension underscores the complex and volatile nature of the conflict. Reports of Ukrainian soldiers entering Russia have sparked confusion among Russians, with many mistaking them for NATO forces. This aligns with the Kremlin's narrative that portrays the war as a NATO attack on Russia, a message reinforced by state propaganda. Despite economic struggles and setbacks on the battlefield, Putin's approval ratings remain high, as war spending sustains the economy and his control over media shapes public perception. Discontent among displaced Kursk residents is growing. Homeless for 3 months, they continue to protest inadequate housing and lack of compensation. This marks the second demonstration in days, highlighting public frustration with the government's response. Meanwhile, U.S. officials report that 5,000 Russian and North Korean troops are mobilized for Kursk, while Ukraine has shifted to defensive tactics, fortifying positions and building infrastructure. With an estimated 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers in Russia, their defense ratio of 2.5 to 1 poses a significant challenge for Russian forces, who face daily losses of 1,200 men. North Korean troops, reportedly fighting as light infantry without armor, may also suffer heavy casualties under Ukrainian artillery and drone strikes. Public concern is growing in Russia, fueled by perceptions of government inefficiency and dishonesty. Residents of Kursk feel abandoned and misled, accusing officials of prioritizing self-preservation over citizen safety. Ukrainian forces' recent successes in capturing towns and cities have shifted the conflict's momentum, raising questions about the decisions of Russian leadership and their implications for the country's future. Adding to the turmoil, Russia has blocked YouTube and Signal, cutting off 2 major sources of independent information for its citizens. This move reflects broader efforts to control narratives, both domestically and internationally, as tensions escalate in the conflict. Refugee crisis and government duty. To understand the severity of the situation, it's crucial to review the facts. Official Russian media, which tends to downplay crises, reported that over 12,000 people have fled the country's border regions. Some earlier reports suggested up to 2,000 evacuees, meaning the true number may be even higher. With Kursk Oblast's population of 1.2 million, this displacement is significant. Similarly, evacuations have begun in Belgorod, adding further strain to neighboring regions struggling to provide refugees with shelter, food, and other resources. tensions have left many displaced residents frustrated, particularly in Kursk. A major complaint is the lack of clear information. While those living near the Ukrainian border understood the risks of war, the rapid advance of Ukrainian forces caught many off guard. Residents had placed their trust in the Russian military and its defense lines, believing they were adequately protected. When the Ukrainian military broke through swiftly, the shock was palpable. The situation was worsened by the delayed acknowledgement from the Russian government. Air raid sirens had become routine, so most people didn't take them seriously. State media initially dismissed the incursion as a minor 300-man operation, causing many locals to remain complacent. It wasn't until Ukrainian troops appeared at their doorsteps that the seriousness became undeniable. The evacuation process further aggravated frustrations. Many residents were ordered to leave with little notice amid the sounds of heavy shelling and explosions. However, there was no clear evacuation plan. Some residents managed to flee thanks to friends and neighbors, while others left independently. Official claims that buses were provided for evacuation were met with skepticism, as many reported no such assistance. Power outages and disrupted communication added to the chaos, leaving affected residents angry and feeling abandoned by the government. The mishandling of the crisis has left Kursk residents deeply dissatisfied, with many accusing officials of downplaying the attack and providing false information on national television. This breakdown in trust underscores the growing challenges faced by both displaced residents and the local administration. Kursk military and strategic developments. The lack of escape aid was another key issue. Most folks drove away because they didn't trust the government to act quickly. They lost essentials after evacuating. Some regions received no evacuation support, increasing concerns that citizens were caught in the battle. To help, the Russian government has offered each displaced Kursk resident $115. Although 1,000 rubles is worth more in Russia, it does not address the depth of the crisis many are facing. Despite the minimal compensation granted to displaced people, many saw it as insufficient for their hardships. It's barely enough to buy a tent, according to social media comments, and it could only cover groceries and needs for a few days. Many refugees believe the government has not done enough to help them. Russian authorities tried to downplay the situation to keep the public oblivious, but this didn't last long. Kursk residents may have told family and friends across Russia about the issue, which could reach millions of Russians. The Ukrainian soldiers destroyed Sudzha, a vital town, during their operation. According to reports and videos, Ukrainian forces are replacing Russian flags with Ukrainian ones, reflecting ongoing tensions. Some have filmed their departure from Kursk, observing damaged military vehicles in the streets. Ukraine has sent its best divisions to the area, which may stay for a while. President Zelensky may create a buffer zone until a peace deal is struck, according to reports. This zone would safeguard Sumy, near Kursk, a place Russia has been targeting for months. Over 2,000 strikes, including 250 glide bombs, have hit Sumy since August. The Russian offensive in Sumy was expected, but Ukraine's actions changed the situation. Ukraine also isolated a Russian unit south of Sumy, putting Russia in a tough position. 3 vital resupply bridges were destroyed. The topography makes resupply difficult for this battalion, which is outside Ukraine's control. Russia has a difficult time providing resources to the battalion now that these bridges have all been destroyed. Ukrainian forces might push on troops stranded across the river, leaving Russia with limited options. Information warfare and Russian politics. These challenges may compel Russian forces to retreat, raising the question of whether President Putin will concede additional territory. Despite setbacks, his control over state media and censorship has historically allowed him to shape public perception and maintain authority, even as support diminishes. Public confusion remains high, fueled by propaganda that vilifies Ukraine and absolves Russia. Ukrainian officials accuse Russia of falsely alleging war crimes in Kursk, with state outlets like Russia Today amplifying these claims. Russian media has also criticized Ukraine's military performance, reporting heavy losses. Over 4,400 soldiers, 65 tanks, 27 infantry vehicles, 53 armored personnel carriers, and various artillery and electronic warfare systems, including HIMARS and MLRS units. While these figures are significant, they should be viewed skeptically, as both sides tend to exaggerate or manipulate information to boost morale and sway opinion. Claims of NATO involvement in the Kursk attack have also surfaced in Russian media, likely to shift blame onto the West. Meanwhile, Russian outlets highlight reported gains in Donbass, such as the liberation of Zhelanya in Donetsk, though questions arise regarding its legal status given prior declarations of autonomy by Russia. Nearly 500 Ukrainian soldiers died in the conflict, the report stated. Although this claim is not unreliable, the reality is more complicated. In recent weeks, Russian soldiers have advanced while Ukrainian forces have retreated. State media regularly utilizes similar reports to distract from other fronts, like as Kursk, where Ukrainian advances are apparently faster. Putin's comparison of Kursk's predicament to the 20-year-old Beslan school catastrophe was remarkable. This hostage crisis killed hundreds, including many children. Critics argue that the Russian government's response to the Kursk events, marked by disproportionate military force, contributed to a high death toll. Putin framed the situation as part of a broader fight against civilian threats, emphasizing the need for national unity and strength. He reiterated his long-standing view that a stronger nationalist state is essential for Russia's security. Despite these assertions, Kursk's defenses were weak under Putin's leadership. His initial misjudgments about Ukraine's military capabilities and NATO support have compounded the situation. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kursk disrupts his goal of forcing Ukraine into accepting a pro-Russian peace deal, particularly concerning regions like Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Reports suggest Ukraine is fortifying its positions in Kursk and shows no intention of retreating, which contradicts Putin's plans. The prolonged conflict could escalate into a significant crisis as military losses mount, hundreds of thousands of injuries among Russian military-aged men, and public dissatisfaction grows. While protests remain limited, many see these sacrifices as necessary to protect the nation, but the pressure on Putin's leadership is intensifying. In conclusion, Russian discontent is growing due to the government's crisis management. Leadership will be under more strain if Kursk worsens. Putin has relied on state control and media manipulation to stay in power, but massive rebellion is possible. As the stakes escalate, it will be crucial to watch how the government responds, whether it can rebuild public trust or whether its authority flaws will have more political repercussions. Russia's leadership may depend on how it handles citizen disenchantment.